Here we go. So, fresh from our practice game the evening before, we set off for Warboar games in Bromley for the regional tournament that they were hosting. Let's go straight into my first game versus Guillaume with his Waiqar. So here are the lists. Mine is the same as in my previous game, but let's have a quick rundown. Aliana with her spear and ambush predator, the big block of archers with some movement, support in the wind rune and the support scion, some overround army support with the verdant sorceress and the rallying starling, and simultaneous orders to be able to power those abilities through. The small unit of archers with tempered steel for some extra damage and lay of the land for the extra movement. Leonx riders with the noob friendly metered march and moment of inspiration for some extra killiness, and a couple of scions with their upgrades. Guillaume had a big block of reanimates with Ankar, Marrow in it, big block of reanimates with Arbus, Curse Signets and Triumphant Cry, 2x2 of Death Knights with Dustblade, Dispatch Runner and Combat Ingenuity. He told me that this was his answer to big models, so Dustblade and Combat Ingenuity to drop their defense right down, so that his Death Knights or his Ardus reanimates can chew through enemy big blocks, and a small unit of archers to round everything out. So here we can see our deployment. We were doing head to head in Demoralize Their Forces. Again, I've placed an overgrown wood in the middle to sort of anchor my big unit around. We're basically playing on two different 3x3s here, and I've got one lone scion on the left to hopefully slow him down, and we'll see how that goes. Some lovely custom printed runes here. 3 greens, ideal for me, but it also means there's not much point me shooting at his reanimates early on. Here, I think he's moved up a bit, and I just programmed in a shot with my scion who just whiffed utterly, not that there was much point. My other troops on my right flank just move all the way up, Aliana getting right up there, the scion moving up and defending. The small archers are dialed in a move and then their shift, which of course triggers lay of the land for a free shift. And essentially this is what the battlefield looks like at the end of turn 1. I've shifted my entire army around on my right flank. He's moved up his blocks. It's a very blurry picture, I apologise for this, there's going to be a few like this. He's resurrected with Ankar, one train, his Ardus block. He's moved his archers into that Latari piece of terrain up on my top left. And there we go. Into turn 2, not so great for wind rune shenanigans, but it does mean I might be able to drop a few reanimates this turn. I go early with my scion, hoping against all hope that he'll be able to hold. Again, I really haven't worked out how to best use these as blockers, so he's just rallied and defended up here. On the other side, my scion moves up. We're trying to circle his forces, try and use my extra mobility here to get those objective tokens from flank charges and rear charges. His unit charges in to my scion and just obliterates it. That's 4 hits times 3, 12. Even without the fact that he's got a surge there to drop my defense by 1, he was toast. What's going on here? Yes, so my big unit of archers opens fire, trying to take down a few skeletons on their way here. Essentially, I would have liked to shoot at the resurrection unit at the back, at the top of the screen, the back of his force, but I didn't quite have the angle on it, and my small unit keeps repositioning itself. I'm just trying to shuffle my army up there towards his deployment zone, essentially. And there you have it. That's the way things are looking. My Leonx riders, I've sort of got myself in a bit of a jam there, and the real issue is that I am now 17 points down from losing the scion, and I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to chew through any of these blocks with the reanimates coming back. Into turn 3, a much better wind rune roll. His resurrection unit, after taking a few casualties from my shooting unit, has gone into the woods. Another blurry picture. My Leonks are again just trying to get themselves into a favourable position here. His Ardus block is just shuffling around, and you can see his cavalry unit, he's reformed them to face my threat coming up around through his deployment zone. He's also moved his archers out of that piece of terrain, picked up a couple of inspiration tokens for moving in and out of it. My Aliana and my Scion up top are just scooting along his deployment zone, trying to get themselves into a position, in Aliana's case, for a late turn charge to pick up points for a unit that hopefully I'll have whittled down a bit. And my smaller archers there getting shift, which means triggers their lay of the land for yet another shift. Into turn 4, excellent for some ability on my big archers. This lone Scion up here is charging up. I want him ahead of Aliana so I can head off the Death Knights if I need to. My big unit shoots and dials in the ability, and what happens here is what I hadn't really planned on, but I went for it, is a couple of accuracy tokens in a perfect roll for it. I think it was hit accuracy on both dice, which meant I was able to just drop Marrow in one shot, or maybe I plinked a wound off previous turn. Either way, that got rid of his main resurrection ability here, so I was quite happy with that. And then I used the wind rune to shift all the way around and out of range of his Ardus block. Now here's a bit of rules and experience. I dialed in a move 4 and the Leon's Riders charge +1, thinking that that would get me, just do a shock charge into his Ardus unit, try and whittle them down. To be honest, it was fairly speculative. I think at this point we hadn't had much fighting going on. We're about halfway through the allotted time, and all we'd done is dance around each other a fair bit. But my opponent pointed out to me that you can't do a charge at 5. You're limited by the template, so that failed. But again, metered march comes to my rescue here, so I just decide not to move them. Over on the top here, Aliana tries to get past his Scion, so I did a 4 move and a shift. The 4 move gets me crashing into the Scion. I didn't quite have the angle on it, but I was able to just shift through him on the second one. Really starting to appreciate the benefits of moving on both dials. We go into turn 5. A fairly decent set of runes there for me. That's the state of the board at the start of turn 5. He shifted his his reanimate block back out of the woods. I think he didn't like getting shot at quite so much. So let's see what happens. I decide at this point that actually engaging with my Leonks is probably not the best bet at this point. In that unit of full strength, threat 3, with an Ardus in it, I thought probably best not, so I sort of shifted out of the way. I think you'll see up top there that my Scion is sort of just armoured up. Aliana just keeps scooting across the top of the battlefield, or his deployment zone, and has reformed to try and face his archers. My big unit opens fire at his Ardus block, I believe. I think I pip a wound off Ardus at this point and continue shifting along and reforming across his deployment zone. And I do believe that the small archer unit is just moving around a bit, contributing a couple of hits here and there. Into turn 6, again, I don't think I got below 2 green runes at any point in this game, which is bad for me in terms of killing reanimates, but great in terms of keeping my unit safe. I keep shooting at his Ardus block with my archers and shifting along. I'm using my rallying styling to keep readying the tempered steel on my small unit of archers. And I think they both shot at the big unit here, and what I'm basically trying to do is get the accuracy symbols and pip wounds off Ardus at this point. I've discovered that that is an easy way for me to get the points I need to just pip this game. At the top you'll see that Aliana tried, I think she tried to charge but didn't quite have the range. There we go, he's shifted his skeletons back, has moved his cavalry around to threaten Aliana's flank. At this point we're both just sort of manoeuvring to try and pick up a few objective tokens here for flank and rear charges. He's moved up with his, just playing at this point 2x3 reanimates to threaten my archers, right behind my scion. So into turn 7. Now at this point the clock is running quite low on us. Because there hasn't been a whole lot of killing, we're still running units at full strength essentially, so the decision making is getting quite tough. I am doing my very, very best to get out of the way and not have to engage his big blocks. I just do not have the hitting power or stopping power to stop them. And he's trying to maneuver these big things to try and hit my units. So it's all a bit of a game of cat and mouse at the moment, and that's really wearing down on the time. So here we go. I go early with Aliana and just... This is very close. So I just shift past his knights, who he had dialed in a charge with just after her, and they just miss her. It was a very close thing. I think I was able to just get out of their way due to the march and reform I dialed in. Very, very close. Could have gone either way, but Guillaume was an absolute gent and went with the fact that they actually did miss the charge. At this point, I decide I need to go for broke. I think I'd pipped a couple of wounds off of Ardus in that unit, so I go charging in with my Leonx Riders, seeing as I had the flank as well, reasoning that if I get them in the flank, drop a few trays, they're not going to have as high a threat. They're not in range for Ardus to use anyone's surges to any real great benefit, so I figured I could go in, drop the unit down a bit, get the 20 points for the flank charge and see what happens. Now I don't have the dice roll for this, but if I remember correctly, I managed to get the one hit token I needed on the blue dice, which takes the last wound off Ardus, scoring me points for his upgrade. My archers both fire into the other unit of reanimates, dropping a whole load of them, which doesn't really matter, and this is the state of play, a very blurry state of play at the end here. As you can see, he'd reformed his biggish block of reanimates to face my cav. He'd actually got a charge off. He dialed in a charge with his smaller unit of reanimates and got the rear charge on my scion. Again, like in the first game, it's me not being quite great at anticipating how the curving moves will work out in this game. So he killed a scion there for some late points and got an objective token. And when all was said and done, I think we called it here because there was about 3 minutes left, 2 minutes left even, and we decided that seeing as we weren't going to be able to play a full 8th turn, likelihood was that Aliana was going to go into a unit, but he was going to be able to charge something else, and we didn't want to sort of cheat each other out of different points based on who manages to go first or not. So we just called it there at the end of turn 7. And we added the points up, and it turned out a very, very close game because I'd only picked up a few points here and there. He'd only really, yes, he's only killed my 2 scions, and we worked it out that I'd scored 52 points to his 33, which came in as a 6-5 win to me. So I was really happy with that as my first tournament game. Guillaume was an absolute gent, very patient with me. Thoroughly enjoyed this game and hope to play him again soon. So a great start to the day, and onwards into game 2.